So, again, how many of you here have been to Southbank? I presume everyone? Yes, everyone in the room? Great news. As you know, it's Brisbane's iconic precinct. We have over 14 million visitors come here every year. We have over 6 million visitors come to the cultural precinct every year. So as you can imagine, this is a very critical part of our Brisbane life. Most of our visitors don't really differentiate between those two precincts. They really think it's just one big happy place. But we're today much more than just a park and a pool. We are many things. As such, you'd imagine we're also a place for great work. Over 8,000 people have the privilege of being employed or working here at Southbank. We also contribute our enormous share back to the gross regional product of our great state, which is about $900 million a year generated in Southbank, so a significant contribution. But now you can understand some of these really positive aspects. It's little wonder that many people say, I really like calling this home. And by calling it home, you need to understand the demographics and the changing demographics that are occurring. According to the Bureau of Stats, over the next 20 years, this peninsula, this Brisbane peninsula that runs through to West End, is expected to grow by 310%. You compare that to Brisbane, which is expected to grow by 22%, and Queensland 39%. Now, I'm not suggesting you go and buy property, but I'm suggesting get ready for the change. So if you all add that information together, Brisbane's radically changing, and it's grown a lot over the last 30 years. 30 years ago, we had our world-famous Expo in 1988. And it's been a long time before we've actually sat down and thought about creating a future Southbank. So what is future Southbank? Well, last year my team, in conjunction with the state government, announced a new master plan. A master plan is a very important starting point for the future of Southbank. And it's really helped people understand for generations to come what the people's place will be. It's really the beginning of a consultation and planning process. What we plan to do is collectively design and deliver a greater Southbank for you. This is the greatest call to arms for the future of Southbank since Expo 88. That name, the People's Place, is very powerful. It was, after all, people power that really led to the creation of Southbank. It's the green heart of the city. But today, we need to understand what brought us here. Expo 88 attracted 16 million people over 182 days. To a part of the city that not many people wanted to come to. It was a very rough part of town. But as the event transformed the city, back in October 88, speculation started to drive about what would happen next. Now, I always love the funny story of Expo, which was it was the year Brisbane learned how to queue. No one had ever stood in a queue before. But in transforming that piece of riverfront real estate, the public had become very fond of the site and wanted it really to last forever in some form. But that pride turned to outrage when the Queensland government announced at the time that that site would become an adjacent city hub to the existing side of the city. So as you can imagine, many developers were probably rubbing their hands together, and probably some of the Treasury people too, given it cost a lot of money to run Expo. But ultimately, the leaders of the day at the time did something very innovative. They banded together and decided to commit the site to the people. 30 years on, we refer to it as the People's Place, which really brings me to the purpose of the presentation today. The Corporation's master plan I spoke of will be a local example of how we bring together and empower people. It will be the way that we ideate and all the way we implement those ideas. I call this community intrapreneurship, or people-powered innovation. In its simple but most complex way, communities can collectively drive projects, just as employees do inside businesses or inside government. Community entrepreneurship will be really a vital part of how this new master plan for this precinct that you sit in today works. It'll also deliver on Southbank Corporation's real social licence, our responsibility to you, on behalf of all Queenslanders. It's an incredible piece of foresight, passion and persistence that the community can be part of in creating something that's so important to the city and so dynamic in the way we present ourselves to the world. And it's really your turn to have a say in its future. So citizen-powered innovation often occurs when communities play that active role in democracy. The Smart Cities Council for Australia and New Zealand found that enabled and empowered citizens play a fundamental role in driving innovation, with a focus on both improving social and economic outcomes for local communities. So that real presence of your thought and power delivers real outcomes. Citizens often identify problems far before placemakers or governments or corporations do. This particularly rings true, as we all know, with millennials, that great group that we love to collectively call Gen Y. We can expect this younger part of our community to constantly challenge norms, to generate new approaches, to generate efficiencies, and really to be a voice, to have their voice heard. Why? Because they understand that the voice for change means you have to accept the change that results. Whereas often older generations tend to accept the norm, be quiet, or understand they need to comply with the rules. So this younger gen are really an important part of not accepting that status quo, and a very important voice in helping us all unlock that entrepreneurial talent within us all. So implementing community entrepreneurship, such a beautiful place, has the potential to improve transparency and trust. Now, this is a critical element I want to talk about today. Between our community and our various public and corporate institutions, the community distrust in institutions at times is quite palpable. Just think about over the last year, where the public reaction and sentiment to banks, aged care, disability, religious institutions all became under the spotlight. At Swinburne, the university down in Victoria, they published a report last year where they interviewed 1,000 Australians and found that 35% of them believed the financial institutions showed no leadership for the greater good. Now that's really strong words, but a sign that there's changing public sentiment, the public want to be more involved. The research confirmed the importance of transparency and accountability to perceptions of trust and leadership for the public good. So from a community perspective, leadership in its many forms occurs when leaders demonstrate those really high ethical standards. And that's, you can lead in your own way, in your own roles. That's not just the leader at the top. So when you demonstrate that, you demonstrate transparency, you demonstrate accountability, and really you open to understanding the impact of those on both the positive and negative impacts of your ideas. You also seek to balance the interest of the many stakeholders, including the wider community and the institutions that the ideas are often nested in. So leadership for the greater good reflects when leaders create value, understand how they created that value, and most importantly, understand who they create that value for. So think about every day when you're generating those ideas of who am I creating this for? So I believe the answer lies in transparency and trust, possibly in community entrepreneurship. This ability of collective people power to collaborate together and to be an innovative voice to support business and government has not really been fully exploited. How this is implemented falls upon us all and really goes to the heart of what our internal entrepreneurial and innate entrepreneurial skills are. So that change has really evolved over the last few years, and you can feel that power and that rise of people's expectation. But there's also the concept of change. We all have an opportunity in the future of both our precinct and our city to understand some of these key implications. We're living in an amazing time, and really the common phrase over the last few years has been change and disruption. So let me just tell you a few stories. Isn't it interesting now that iPhones are more valuable than oil? Apple's bigger than Exxon. Isn't it amazing that 117 startups over the last 10 years are now valued at $1 billion? Isn't it amazing that business models have changed the way we think about simple things? Uber, the world's largest taxi company, owns no vehicles. Airbnb, the world's largest accommodation provider, owns no real estate. Facebook, the world's most popular media provider, creates no content. Alibaba, the world's largest retailer, has no inventory. And most importantly, the most popular beach in Australia isn't on the coast. It's right here. So cities around the world are facing both amazing challenges and amazing opportunities. Population growth, changing demographics, and really technology evolution that we see in our day-to-day lives, just to name a few. So I'll remind you back of that population forecast for this precinct. South Brisbane's going to grow 310% over the next 20 years. To give you a bit more of a background, I'll just give you a little bit of content. Infrastructure Australia released a paper on planning livable cities, which it looked at place-based approaches to sequencing infrastructure and growth in this path that we're in of evolving cities. At the time, it really tried to understand the importance of that sequencing, but what it found was it can only be done through a lens of outcomes for a place or community rather than just the outcomes for a particular sector. And what that meant was there's a central role for communities. There's that intrapreneurial central role where the community needs to come together and really provide that backdrop, which is the most valuable backdrop, which is local knowledge about their area, which can't be often captured in statistics or metrics. Communities can also play a very important people power role to bring forward those ideas and really define their local community relative to others. Some examples of where this can be done includes a wide array of country towns all over Australia. And think about how real community entrepreneurship has driven those towns who are slowly dying to what they are today and put them back on the map. And they use things like iconic local festivals, music festivals, sports events, technology hubs, and even, as you'd all know, some memorable fruit and animals to define their city. And if you can't think of something, think prawn or pineapple. Additionally, that Infrastructure Australia report really focused on a couple of key elements that I want to bring out for you. The first is that people need to be able to tell their story of an area. It's a really important part of how you design the growth for an area. Secondly, it needs to reflect community demographics. We've changed dramatically from the cities and states and country we were 20, 30, 50 years ago. And lastly, we need to allow for frank and honest community conversation and really understand the expectations and the trade-offs of the decisions that we make together. So many of those projects are undertaken by and for communities in a way often where people aren't informed. They just happen. And really what we're saying here today is this approach really leaves little room for discussion and it leaves little room for that community entrepreneurship, which is such a vital part of our evolution. So we need to act now to be really empowering each other to deliver a better array of people's places for the future generations. But do we need a crystal ball? No, we don't need a crystal ball. Our world's turned upside down. But it's as simple as being involved in your street. It's as simple as being involved in your sporting group. It's as simple as being involved across your whole city in initiatives that are happening every day. So just a small reminder how easy it is, and a small plug for us, of course, never miss opportunity. We've created a new website. It's called futuresouthbank.com.au. And that's the place where people can register their interest and share their views. This, we hope, will bring a broad spectrum of ideas that will generate new businesses, new jobs, and new experiences for all of you. So that's futuresouthbank.com.au. Sometimes those entrepreneurial outcomes reap rewards far above what those professional advisors and consultants can really bring us. We all know that when you have a problem, people feel that the more people that get involved, the better the solution can often be. And often that has a ripple effect, and that ripple effect leads to achieving results that are far beyond what the original expectations were. And if you're in academic circles, they call that innovation. While it's important for people to think outside the box, we also need to weigh up the checks and balances. After that sort of pre-planning phase, when ideas are thrown into the melting pot, we often need a real strong feasibility process in some form, and although that's a big concept, it can be as simple as trial and error, or it can be as strong as rigorous testing or piloting of an idea. Finally, we need to be mindful that we are carrying out community entrepreneurship, and we need to balance idea with reality. The community come forward with some great ideas, but we need to deal with things like practicality and safety. For example, it was suggested to the council last year that we should put the wheel of Brisbane in the middle of the river. Probably a great idea, but might have a few challenges. What makes a great place? Look, I know you're not urban designers, architects or planners, but hopefully you'll get access to this and it will talk to you about so many different ways, so many elements that you can be part of making something a great place. So in conclusion, I see community entrepreneurship as a vital way people power works. It's bringing these ideas, it's commercialising them, and that creates those jobs and businesses and experiences that will bloom from the seeds that we plant. We also know that focused help from the community will continue to weave the magic that will make those new people's places and those new people's initiatives that are so special and for everyone. So here at Southbank, we're running a precinct that we think caters for a melting pot of abilities, languages, cultures, offers so much. So don't miss your opportunity to have a little bit of skin in the game in our future Southbank. So finally, I'll call on everyone here to get involved. Spark your community to do the small intrapreneurial things that build the new innovations for future generations. It's as simple as helping children earn their first pocket money or bringing together minds to solve societal problems. Support innovation in its many forms, have vision, be risk takers, and build the precinct for the next 30 years and deliver this as one of the most livable cities in the world. We can't do it without people-powered innovation. Long live community entrepreneurship.